Okay, folks, it's time for me to apologize that there was a button that I thought I hit and I didn't. So here I am coming your way again, and I will run through the beginning part a bit quicker, but that was just a blip, a technical difficulty here. And so Anthony Parenti here presenting to you Positive Psychology, Part 1. A strength-based approach to working with gamblers. So we're going to talk about positive psychology, how to apply it, talk about how this is a strength-based approach to gambling treatment, and how to develop a greater understanding about how to use these positive psychology principles and work them into healthy lifestyle choices for the gambler and their families. And I also want to help you to create the therapeutic conditions which allow clients to thrive. So let's just take a deep breath and then another to get us started. I'm sure you were all wondering, what's going on? How come I'm not hearing anything? What could be wrong? But all is right in the here and now. So life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. How do you know this is the experience you need? Because this is the moment. This is the experience you are having at the moment. Eckhart Tolle, who also wrote The Power of Now, but The New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose is where I took this from. So you couldn't hear the broadcast. I'm imagining that you didn't say, you might have seen it. But anyway, let's go back to this exercise. And any of these exercises, you couldn't hear me say this before, but you could use for your clients, and certainly it's good for our own personal development and professional development to learn new ways to bring out the best in ourselves and in those that we serve. So imagine a time in your life where you were your best self. What was the experience? What aspects of yourself were most prominent? What strengths and attributes did you use? Think about that. Jot down some of these responses. Pen and paper might be useful for today's training. So what was it? Your courage, your knowledge, your compassion. What attributes are most helpful to you and that come out when you are experiencing your best self? So jot down some of the strengths that you see that are a part of who you are. And what are your signature strengths? And this might be a new term for you, but signature strengths are character strengths that people identify with, appreciate having, and enjoy using. So they're a part of how you define yourself, who you are. We all have strengths. Again, this is a strength-based approach. We want to emphasize people's strengths. We want to help them to be more in touch with their strengths. We want to help them to use their strengths in ways that serve them well. So what strengths do you have that you appreciate having? You know, we're all unique. We're all special in our own way. What strengths do you like putting to use? Your wholeheartedness that you come to situations with, your ability to stay calm in the face of adversity, your ability to work through adversity, your sense of justice. So as you reflect on that, let's move along and kind of talk a little bit more about the basics of positive psychology. So this book here, some of you may be familiar with, actually, most of you may be familiar with this book. It's a national bestseller by Martin Seligman, Learned Optimism. But when we think back to the roots of positive psychology, it actually started way back with Aristotle and the ancient philosophers, Plato. They would reflect on subject matter that is still very important and always has been when it comes to human nature. As psychology took shape and form in the 1900s, but later into the 1900s, Maslow and Rogers gave birth to humanism. At the time, it was called the third force in psychology because it came out in opposition to psychodynamic and behavioral approaches because they thought that those approaches were too much involved in negative aspects of the human experience. And they said that, Maslow in particular said that there's more good in people than their weaknesses or their illnesses. So why not focus on what's good about others? And most of you know that humanism speaks to all people are good and all people have good inside and all people are striving to do their best to work towards being actualized. Well, Martin Seligman is the father of positive psychology. And this book speaks to not all about positive psychology, but how you can learn to be optimistic, because actually what we've learned in our upbringing and how we're socialized as human beings is more on the negative side, to see the bad, or not to see the bad necessarily, but we have this negativity bias that's a part of our survival mechanisms that have us prepared for scenarios that aren't likely to take place, to be on the lookout and alert and see things that are more pessimistic as opposed to optimistic. So this is a book I've recommended to so many clients over the years, and I wouldn't be surprised if quite a number of you in the audience have done similarly with your clients. So speaking more to the roots of positive psychology, now if we go back again, post-enlightenment, moral philosophy, philosophers have spoke about human nature in so many ways, about happiness and ways in which people can experience the good in life, things about human nature. I mentioned the humanists, but even before the humanists, Gordon Allport, who was a very important personality theorist, spoke about the good in people and the ways in which they attempt to be, and that their personality comes together as an expression of the good in them. And then you also see, again, that main root right in the middle there, Greeks, ancient Greeks and Aristotle. So if positive psychology is the tree, its roots are all here. And even to add topics of today, prevention and wellness are a big part of positive psychology. So according to Aristotle, a quote from him, happiness is the meaning and the purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. Right there, he's speaking about it. He spoke a lot about this topic. The first psychologists were really philosophers. And it's amazing how wise they were with their limited exposure to the world and human nature, but all part of our history and experience. So a definition of positive psychology: it is a scientific study of the strengths that enable individuals and communities to thrive. The field is founded on the belief that people want to lead meaningful and fulfilling lives. Positive psychology is about cultivating what is best within each individual and community, and to enhance their experience of love, work, and play. Okay. Formal definition, but one that is packed with so many important phrases and terms. How do we help our clients to thrive? How do we help them to bring out the best in themselves? A strength-based approach. And when our clients can experience love and enhance their ability to work and play, we are helping to change the patterns that have been established that lead them to maladaptive patterns that lead them to addictions. So the diagram here, traditional psychology, as you see on one end, has lots of worth to it, of course, repairing, healing, but weakness and illness, it's more of a pathological approach. Like we focus on pathology in most approaches in psychology. And positive psychology looks to move away from pathologizing. Strength-based approaches do not focus on pathology. They focus on helping us to see the good in our clients, but more importantly, to help our clients to see the good in themselves. So topics like thriving and flourishing, strengths of the individual, and well-being. We all have strengths, sure, we all have weaknesses, and nobody's perfect, and nobody can even attempt to be. That, of course, gets in the way, as we all know. But we all want to be well, and we can be. We have the capacity for that. So what has become an important focus in the treatment of addictions and mental health problems? Positive psychology helps to improve our relationships with ourselves and with others. I mean, when you think about it, aren't we trying to help people to feel better about themselves? And when they can exist more in community with others and their relationships improve, then that bodes well for their recovery. You know, I often say that it takes a village for anyone to get to a better place who struggles with the issues of addiction, gambling issues, in more specifically, but all addictions. So what positive psychology works on, it helps people foster the conditions of happiness. Okay? And it's quite possible to do this with every individual because all people want to be happy. By working on things like optimism and focusing on happiness and improving relationships, we can increase the frequency of positive emotions. We actually can change the way the brain works for our clients by working on this strength-based approach. It improves one's ability to be grateful and to be optimistic. Gratitude is a very powerful skill to develop with folks. And optimism is also another skill that we could help to develop in our clients. We could all use improvement in this area just by being a human being. So positive psychology involves topics like gratitude, which is why, I mentioned, actually I mentioned in the breathing exercise that I didn't go through quickly, so my blip there. But if we were to even just think about in this moment, what are you grateful for today? Who are you grateful for? And what has taken place in the last 24 hours in your life that you're grateful for, that you're grateful that you could be a part of? Just some reflection. Positive psychology involves optimism, which is much more than just seeing the glass half full. We'll talk about that. Positive psychology involves purpose, living a life of purpose and meaning. People want to live a life of purpose and meaning. Positive psychology involves happiness. Don't know a person who doesn't want to experience, even if it's just a moment of happiness. and flow. Now, some of these topics we'll be covering in part 2 later in the month, but these are positive psychology topics of study, scientific study, because positive psychology is the scientific study of these topics. So let's think about a gambling disorder for a moment. I'm not going to go over all the criteria. You mostly are familiar with them. I'm sure a majority of folks have taken the basic training. But this just kind of encapsulates the beginning part of the DSM-5 diagnosis, the first step of it: persistent and recurrent problematic gambling behavior, which leads to impairment or distress, significant impairment and distress, as indicated by at least 4 of 9 criteria. Unsuccessful attempts to cut back or to eliminate gambling, increasing tolerance, those kinds of things, feeling distress when people stop gambling. There's lots of issues that are a result of a gambling disorder or a byproduct of gambling behavior, right? But if we think for moments about, yes, we need to diagnose in order to get insurance reimbursement, and diagnosis is helpful for understanding the functioning of an individual. But there's so much more to a person than their diagnosis. And if we just focus on the ways in which their diagnosis is manifested, we're losing sight of a lot of important aspects of the individual. So when we think about psychological causal factors, stressful life events are certainly linked to addiction. We know that stress, relates to the causal factors, that stressful lives lead to addictive outcomes. And the diathesis stress model proposed that some people have vulnerability factors that increase their risk for addiction and gambling. These are all basics about causal factors in psychology. What leads people to struggle and have maladaptive responses to the challenges in their lives. Well, it could be biological. It's certainly psychological from their environment. Social factors lead to this as well. Studies show that neuroticism and negative affectivity can predispose people to gambling addiction. So these are like personality factors that are present in folks. And there's a lot of personality factors. I just chose these two to speak about here. But that worrisome, that ruminating, that seeing the negative all of the time, experiencing an awful lot of negative emotion, predisposes people to gambling addictions. And we know how powerful it is. When I'm gambling, I may not feel these things. I'm not thinking in worrisome ways. Early adversity, trauma, and loss are certainly diatheses as well. And we know the connection there between addiction and early trauma and loss. So what are the beliefs about curative factors that lead to change in the work that you do? What are the theoretical underpinnings related to the approaches that you use? So a little reflection here to just kind of think about what we use. I recently did a basics training in the month of March that some of you may have attended. But, I was asking people about their therapeutic approach. Most people, when we did a poll, it was cognitive behavioral. No surprise there. That's the most evidence-based treatment approach that we have in our toolkit. So what approach underlies your theoretical bend? There are so many approaches to counseling, psychotherapy, and treatment. Most folks do an eclectic approach, or practice, I should say, an eclectic approach, which is good, picking and choosing from different approaches. Cookie cutter approaches we've gotten away from because nothing works for all people all of the time. But that's one of the beauties of humans and human nature. So do you practice life in the way that you approach therapy? there's usually a connection between our own philosophies of life and the ways in which we go about the work that we do. And we bring so much of ourselves to the work that we do. So let's do a little practicing or working or understanding optimism a little bit better. It's a characteristic frame of mind that leads someone to expect positive outcomes and view the world as a positive place. A characteristic frame of mind, okay? You can help teach people to be more optimistic. And as counselors, we are teachers in some ways, of course, right? But we want to help people to see that they have choices. They could look at this in a gloom and doom kind of way, or they can begin to think about, what are these challenges that are facing me, as opposed to, this is going to lead to my demise, I'm never going to be able to get through this. Well, optimism. Optimism helps us to cope with challenges. Optimism helps to put us in a place that we're more likely to achieve goals. So, such an important goal in gambling treatment, to reduce harm or to achieve abstinence, and to be able to maintain the harm reduction that we might be working on. Optimism helps to breed positive emotions. People that are optimistic experience more positive emotions. We change the brain. And you see that on the list as well, that studies show that different brain areas light up when people are more optimistic, and we can help change those connections, that neuroplasticity, that people are creating new connections all the time with their life experiences. So it'll increase social support, because optimistic people enhance their social relationships, improve their relationships. And that positive emotion and the way we change our brains can help to short circuit the rumination, the worry that people have, the worrisome approach to their life, the way they get stuck in their worries and can't see things outside of the worries. And optimism helps to buffer folks from mental health and addiction issues. So it helps to prevent depression, to alleviate anxiety disorders, to help people with PTSD. So ways to boost optimism. Now, optimism is not being Pollyanna-ish. The world's not just rosy and beautiful all the time, and I only see the good, okay? That is not being optimistic. But remember the past. Remember different obstacles that you've overcome. I've done other workshops on resilience, and this is about resiliency. How do we use the strengths that people have? What have you been able to get through before? How did you do that? That being your best self exercise at the beginning, just taking a few moments to think about that and to put those, be more mindful of tapping into those attributes as resources. Tracking positive experiences. What was the development of certain things that took place in your life, and can we track them in a positive way? Surrounding yourself with positivity. Now, this is a little tough to do in many of our clients' lives, but making choices about who you spend time with and who you look for support from. How do you lean into people that are actually going to provide you support, or be less judgmental, and those kinds of things? Again, can be a challenge, but we can make choices along these lines, and we can teach our clients to do that more. Being mindful of our language, even. And what I mean by that is that self-talk, that negative self-talk. Can you change the habits in your thinking? So making optimism a habit takes practice, just like any other habit. We typically don't think of the ways in which we think as being a habit, but it clearly is. So we could teach folks to practice thinking more positively, and just by what have we learned from setbacks, as opposed to, this was a terrible, horrible thing, I don't know if I'll ever recover from it. But again, like I said, it takes practice. So, repetition. And, the thing about the life experience that we help people process and work through, there are always going to be other life experiences to help people work through. So here's an exercise. If I didn't have that mishap at the beginning here, I would spend more time on this. But this is something I just want to share with you. We're not going to do it because of time constraints, but I would have you close your eyes, and you could even do this for a second if you'd like. But imagining yourself 5 or 10 years from now, and imagine that things have gone well as you could have hoped for in your life. Having your dreams realized and the achievement of your deepest and most meaningful goals. Now, this could be quite challenging for some. Imagining a positive future, okay? Well, studies show that when people imagine a positive future, they're significantly happier for weeks. They experience better physical health outcomes and are less likely to fall ill. So it helps to boost the immune system. So it gets people to think about and be in touch with what goals are meaningful for them. So you want to consider different domains, as we have listed here. In the positive future, what are your relationships like? What is your career turn into? Where does it take you? What is going on in your family? Maybe grandchildren are older, or your children are older, and being able to relate to them as adults, or things like that. What are interests that you have and hobbies? And I have folks bask in these images and to savor the feelings that come up, and then have them write a paragraph about their positive future. I mean, this is something you could do today or at any time, of course, but this is very useful, and it does lead to longer lasting change when people can practice these types of exercises. This helps to boost optimism. And a lot of times with these positive psychology approaches, it's helpful to do some exercises that help people to practice this and help people to live this more in their lives. So real optimism is aware of problems, but recognizing solutions, knowing about difficulties, but believing they can be overcome. Seeing the negatives, but accentuating the positives. Is exposed to the worst, but expects the best. Has a reason to complain, but chooses to smile. If we could live a day in this way, we're doing something good for ourselves. So, but increasing people's awareness of what optimism is. And like I said, it's more than just the glass being half full. Optimistic people are much more fun to be around, and we enjoy their company more, and other people would enjoy our company more when we're able to be optimistic. So, it's just kind of a way of approaching life. It's a way of orienting our perspective and our approach. So let me tell you a little bit more about some of the basics of positive psychology. There's something called a Perma model in positive psychology, and you see what Perma is there. It consists of positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. And we're not going to get a chance to get into all of this today, but this model relates to how we could live a life of happiness and overall life satisfaction. With positive emotions, it's the ability to feel good, to experience more positive emotions. And I mentioned how optimism can help with that. The engagement part is finding a way to engage in what our life is about and engage in the meaningfulness into our lives. But meaning is another part of the pie here. But here's what I mean. Finding flow is finding those activities that we enjoy doing, but that may take intense concentration, and a way that we engage in it. We come into a zone where we're experiencing the moment more. That's what engagement is. And in our next part two, I'll talk more about flow. With relationships, it's about building stronger connections. People enhance our lives. When you think about it, our lives are made up of our relationships. And how could we have a life without relationships? Now, I know the clients that we serve are not, relationships are typically not their strong point. They might rub other people the wrong way, or people easily rub them the wrong way. They may not be the most empathic of individuals, but how can we help to build that so that they could improve their relationships? And mindfulness activities do that. Optimism helps that as well. And then when we can help people to understand what meaning life has for them, to help them to live a more purposeful existence, discovering the direction in life and what helps people to feel fulfilled. What I find for folks, if they're more able to be themselves in the different areas of their life, it helps to give their life more meaning. And I help people to work towards goals along those lines. And then achievement, that sense of accomplishment. What do you take pride in? How can you take more pride in yourself and motivate yourself to continue to work towards growth? Again, the humanistic approach, the positive psychology approach is about we're all striving to be our best selves, to realize our full potential. And I truly believe that everybody is. So how can we help our clients to see ways in which they do that? I'm sure with the entire audience here today that I'm speaking to, can't see you, but I know you're out there. Think about what you're trying to improve on. There's always things that we're trying to improve on. That is the human condition. That is human nature, to want to grow and to thrive. We don't always think of it as ways of thriving. And how can we be more positive about that? Instead of focusing on the negative, what we do is we focus on our problems and become very critical of ourselves, and that does not create the conditions for thriving and striving to improve. So the brain on positive emotions. So if we talk about this a little bit, we all know about the pleasure center. We all know that our clients have artificially stimulated the pleasure center of their brain in a way that has changed their brain, in a way that makes them bored when there's not a whole lot of stimulation, on a way that helps them want to do what was not in their best interest to experience pleasure. So, we know that dopamine is released into the nucleus accumbens, and that we have to help our clients to experience more positive emotion so that they can have the natural experience of happiness, because positive emotion helps to activate happiness. And when happiness is activated, it's very hard to be sad at the same time. Now, our heart can be touched. We could feel the awe in a moment of just like wonderment. That's a great thing to experience. But when we do that, we are helping ourselves to thrive. And that is within our ability and capacities to be able to do that. So let's talk a little bit here about happiness. What does happiness mean to you? Think about points in your life when you felt happy. The happiness felt due to some event or accomplishment. And think about some of your accomplishments or particular milestones in your life. Getting that degree, buying your first house. But how often do you think about those situations? So that's what I mean by happiness felt due to some event or accomplishment typically fades. So positive psychologists use the term happiness to refer to a subjective sense of well-being, as well as a sense that your life is worthwhile. All lives are worthwhile. Like I said before, each and every one of us, each and every one of you are unique and special. And we want to help ourselves to feel that way, but more importantly, we want to help our clients to feel that way. A subjective sense of well-being and a sense that your life is worthwhile. So Seligman's 3 pathways to promote happiness help people to experience positive emotions, however that might work. You know, I'm thinking about clients that I have and the ways in which they've enjoyed their children once they've been able to gain control over their gambling impulse, and ways in which they can feel more present when they're with their wife and with their family, or with their husband and their family. I know families aren't always positive, but people that we care about and love, when we're giving and receiving love, that is certainly going to promote pleasurable emotions, help us to appreciate who we are, help to change the brain. So when people engage fully in their goals and activities, you know, have you noticed that, you know, people's lives get better when they enter recovery and they're able to get some footing and get some grounding under themselves, and then they start thinking a little bit more clearly about what's important to them and what they can do to engage more in what's important to them. And, you know, being even able to perform, you know, better at work, those kinds of things. So searching for meaning outside the self, these are 3 pathways. We could work on them separately, but they all intertwine and are important together. So searching for meaning, fully engaging and feeling good helps lead to life satisfaction. And so happiness isn't a destination. Happiness isn't an accomplishment. Happiness is an experience of the world as we're living it, and feelings of worth within ourselves. So what doesn't make us happy is what the research has found is money and material things. Our youth, we're not usually happy in youth, and our children don't necessarily make us happy, because parenting is the hardest job in the world, and it's our children don't create happiness for us. Can we have happy moments with our children? Absolutely, and I hope all of you do that have children. But just having children is not enough to make us happy. So this whole happiness concept, when we experience happiness, we have more of these neurotransmitters secreted into our into the synapses of various regions of our brain. And again, stimulating the pleasure center. So that pleasure chemical, dopamine, experiencing it more in real ways as opposed to those artificial ways, drugs and alcohol and gambling promotes. It changes the brain. You could change the brain back. Calming chemical. When we experience happiness, then we feel calmer. We're more at ease. We appreciate our life more. Certainly it increases serotonin, which is a happiness chemical, and increases our brain's ability to reuptake serotonin, less of a need for psychiatric drugs and such. It helps to promote glutamate, which is a memory chemical, which helps to build our memory function and abilities, and to fend off brain deterioration. So what we're doing is making new connections, and we're building our brain up. Studies show that certain areas of the brain can actually increase in volume and size when we promote good feelings and happiness. And then, of course, endorphins as well. That euphoria chemical, yes, it's a pain reliever, our endorphins, but also when we feel good, maybe after we've exerted ourselves, or I've had a positive experience, maybe a good feeling you even have after you finished a session that really felt like you talked in a way that made a difference to the client, that you talked together, that you collaborated, that you were really working together. When you have that experience, that's good for the brain and good for your clients' brains, of course. So happiness is good for our minds, of course. You know, with all of this, you could say, of course, but how much time do we spend focusing on these kinds of things? It's good for our minds. It's good for our health. It's good for our mental and physical health. So, you know, it promotes immune system function. It helps to keep us healthier physically, to fend off disease. And studies back this up. It's, of course, good for our lives because it enhances our life. It enhances our experience of life and promotes our own happiness. Things like gratitude and optimism, things like compassion, as well as self-compassion. We can all use to be more self-compassionate, to have more kindness and gentleness towards ourselves. Sometimes it's easier to be more compassionate towards others than it is to ourselves. But all of this helps to strengthen our relations and connections. We are social beings. We need others. I think COVID has been a great example of how much we need others, even those who aren't involved in our lives. The world works better when everybody's able to do the work of living, and with jobs and family and those kinds of things, that it helps to enhance the world in which we live. We engage in flow more, which again, I'll get to a little bit more the next session, as well as purpose. So savoring the moments. If we could do this exercise, it's a mindful practice about cultivating joy, okay? Joy is a component of psychological well-being. And I have a little mindfulness exercise for us. If I could have you get into a very comfortable position in your seat, put your feet planted, both feet touching the ground below you. Sit back, shoulders back, head straight. And take a couple of long, slow, steady, deep breaths. Joy is a capacity that we all have. It's a capacity that we could train and develop in ourselves and in others. Allow yourself to soften your body. Allow yourself to be here now. Follow your breath. If your mind wanders, just bring it back to my voice or to your breath. Joy is something that's often neglected. But we want to embrace joy, and this is an exercise to help us to cultivate and embrace joy. So I'd like you to bring to mind something that you regularly enjoy, something that you do, some person that you spend time with. It could be anything. A life's simple pleasure, a cup of coffee or tea in the morning, a walk, watching the night sky turn a favorite snack you have, someone you appreciate or love. Some spacious moment in your day. And embrace and visualize that experience. The sights, the sounds, the feel, tactile sense, but also the feelings that arise. And bring a childhood exuberance to this experience. Embrace it fully, wholeheartedly, being present. Maybe it's when you notice the stars in a sky or a piece of music, sunlight on the flowers or the buds changing from one day to the next, becoming bigger and fuller. Sense how your attention and innocent perception can affect your world in this moment. Allow your heart to tremble in the midst of the experience, gladdened by the simplicity of the moment. Now move away from the visualization, but just allow yourself to be for another moment. Put a smile on your face and notice what arises, what feelings, what thoughts. Notice how your body feels. Open your eyes. We will end our webinar here for today. Another way to promote all of this is to just go out and practice random acts of kindness to help us to feel good about who we are and what we do, to embrace joy and to embrace the joy that others feel as they go through their life. We call that empathic joy. I look forward to the next time we can gather, and I thank you very much for your attention today. Peace, everyone.